and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oleander, your designated open book. This is the second part in a two-part video discussion. The first part was simply a book review, a fairly critical book review. My review and why I made it is because it provides specific examples from which to view the problems and questions that I'll be bringing up in this video, but it is not necessary to understand anything going forward, which is why I've kept the two separate. The book review itself is quite harsh, and for the sake of proper tactful discussion about the state of indie publishing and marketing, I will keep the book author and publishing house's name, which spurred me to discuss this topic, anonymous in this video. If you'd like to go watch the first video on the specifics, by all means, go ahead. I just don't want to drag that writer's name around, bring them down, or crucify them as like the prime example of the problem that I'm seeing in indie publishing right now, because I think that their work is just a symptom of a bigger problem that's forming in our writing community, which is what we will be discussing today. So for context, I'd followed a particular author on Twitter for some time, since back when the platform was called Twitter. They're pretty thoroughly spoken on proper practice in the writing sphere, and for the most part, they are a pretty uplifting and positive figure. I bought 2 books by that author because of the standard that they presented as a supportive veteran of the indie writing community. One was a poetry book and one was their debut novel, which was the start of a trilogy. It's important to note that I bought these 2 works before actually having read anything by them because I trusted in the quality that they would be, because of the way that the author presented themselves as professional, i.e. stressing the need to enlist editors, get beta readers, etc. There was a level of vetting that I was led to expect. I didn't dislike the poetry collection, as I found it very expected from the author, specifically in how they market and brand their account. The debut novel, however, I DNF'd at 20% because it felt quite unrefined. I'm not a wizard, I'm not a writing god, but I do know a lack of editing when I see it. From the notable repetitive descriptors, overuse of adverbs, jarring sentence structure, word choice, awkward narrative perspective, unearned character development / progression, and pacing issues with lots of exposition in exposition. There were quite a few problems. And being so disappointed with this book led to a lot of questions, a lot of things that I think are important to discuss because it pertains to the longevity and image of self-publishing as a whole. That's why I'm not using the author's name, because although they are my case example, they are not all of the sins of the world. They are but one of many. Speaking in specifics, it's just easier to justify my points should that be needed. So this author, who will remain nameless, had over 23,000 followers on Twitter at the time of my purchase, and they founded a small publishing house in their niche which, at the time, had at least 3 other members, which meant that through the presentation and marketing of their debut book, I was led to expect a certain level of quality. Now, let me be very clear that I would not bat an eye at this debut novel's lack of editing if it was self-published by an individual author, and that would be completely fine, like absolutely fine. Everyone has to start somewhere. But because it was backed by the social media presence of this particular author and was published through an indie publishing house with a professed editor, which the house takes on and does collaborative work with other writers for collections, I did bat an eye. At that point, that level of influence and space taken in representing the indie publishing community, being a face for it, I don't just expect better, but I demand better? I'm not a snob, and I know that writers with greater amounts of influence than me are just people too. But at a certain point, as a fellow writer, even just as a reader, I think there's a line where we not just want our expectations to be met, but demand that standards be upheld, in a way. Book reviews are product reviews. So let's say that you bought a product that everyone had 5 stars. You order it online, get it in the mail, and realize when it arrives that it doesn't function even remotely like advertised. Wouldn't you be mad? Wouldn't you demand that the expectations set be met? And I think that that translates to even small indie publishing houses too, where if you have gone through the trouble of calling yourself a publishing house, market yourself as a proper business going through the rounds of vetting quality work. There is an expectation that needs to be met, quality of editing of a book that should be produced. And I don't want this to come off as blind angst or hate or even jealousy towards any publishing house, because it's not necessarily about this publishing house. It's about the idea of what publishing is and should be. What constitutes false advertising, and overall, what does it do to the landscape of indie publishing? I want to open the floor for a discussion on indie publishing and quality control. I don't think indie writers should be held back from publishing whatever quality of content they want, because that's their right and their personal brand of quality. I think that this discussion is much more about forced positivity and false advertising. This isn't just a problem with the lax standards and creation of small publishing houses. It's kind of everywhere. I'm sure if you're watching this, you watch a lot of WriterTube too, and by now I'm sure we're all quite aware that some author tubers don't follow their own advice. But if they're consistent and loud enough, they will become a guru on the platform regardless. Same goes for this situation with indie presses that are little more than a non-committed group of unqualified writers. They're just very present and market a lot on social media, which sounds like a complaint against good marketing. But I'm not jealous as a writer. I'm peeved as a reader, because it is false marketing. It's the rightful disappointment of being herded as a reader by the echo chamber that some authors create for themselves in their work, of positive reviews and foretold writing experience, being led to the edge of a cliff and shoved off like, we should have expected this all along. Saying the argument, it's just good marketing, isn't an excuse for hyping up and essentially lying about the quality of a book. This may be a complaint that I have as a reader, but it feeds into a worry that I have as a writer. These writers, these small publishing houses with so much influence and sway, presenting low quality work as the standard is detrimental to the industry as a whole. Let's say you're not a writer. Let's say that you are exclusively a reader and have never written a word in your life except to review things, God bless you. You're shopping around and all you want is a middle-tier novel, good enough to hold your attention, but not enough to wow. And that'll be enough to satisfy you. You pick up a novel from a small publishing house and you're immediately assaulted with grammar problems and awkward sentence structures. You're confused because you're not a writer, but you are an experienced reader, and you know when something hasn't been edited, and you don't understand how this made it through the publishing process at whatever small publishing house. You shrug it off, screw it, go pick up another one from a different indie publishing house because you want to support small writers, and are met with the same thing. I'm not saying traditional publishing doesn't put out some straight garbage sometimes, but with indie publishing, the effects of losing the trust of a reader and the quality that we are going to provide actually matters. Those are sales out of the pocket of a real person, not a big five corporation. Every writer isn't accountable for the reputation of every other writer in the world, but the way that we advertise ourselves holds us accountable to the things that we choose to align with. If we are an editor, we are expected to know how to edit. If we write romance, there is expected to be chemistry between our characters. If we promote the importance to other writers of going through the process of beta reading and hiring editors, then our work should reflect having done that. So on and so forth. So when indie authors and small publishing houses with large influence are allowed to set the standards, but do not adhere to a certain quality, we are all affected. That jaded reader is going to be less likely to take a chance on a good indie writer who is even smaller because they've already been let down by the false advertising of other big ones too many times. It hurts the general perception as self-publishers as a whole when we overhype and false advertise our work as professional when it has not gone through the proper channels. I guess this is kind of why self-publishing used to have such a bad reputation. Indie publishing was under the assumption that there were no standards, and therefore the work put out by self-pub authors were dismissed. We've gotten past that, or at least I'd say that we have, to the point where it doesn't matter if it's indie or traditionally published. There's an array of quality that you can expect, depending on the genre and the author, and, most importantly, the presentation of them. But in that, I think that we've also regressed, Because anything from anywhere can be any quality, we've stopped caring about the quality and started caring more about the presentation of the content, the advertising. This debut novel is an amazing showing by X author, and it's like, okay, high praise but vague. Is it amazing based on that author's other work? Or other authors? Or the genre? Is that based on the fact that it's a debut or the fact that it's a genuinely good book regardless of that? There's just so much hype marketing out there, it's hard to know what's real. Does any of it count? What can I expect? You could say that I shouldn't expect anything, that I shouldn't have expectations because we're all different writers and have different styles. But it is supposed to be a profession, isn't it? We want to be writers by trade. You don't let anyone perform brain surgery. They do need years of schooling and a medical degree, and practice, experience, you know? So, where do we start with this conundrum? Now that the playing field for publishing writing is wide open for entry. My main concern, and why I brought this up, is because if the expectations set by forming your own publishing house or just publishing your book solo as an indie author don't actually exist anymore, then what does that do to the value of the industry? If we don't have a set amount of standards, then I'm worried about the continuous degradation and decline of writing being valued by society at all. But again, I don't know who gets to set those standards. Do we set them on ourselves? I tried to set them on myself, but I have also never professed to have hired a professional editor for my work. I edit myself, and that's the issue, right? If every writer is a different skill level, and every editor is of a different efficiency, and every publishing house is willing to put out different levels of work, where does that leave readers? In the hands of other readers, you would think. This whole rabbit hole of discussion was based on the fact that the reviews of the book that I DNF'd were also misleading. Generally all 5 stars until I found one blessed being who shared the same opinion on the objective worth of the process of storytelling, that if it's hard to get to the end for a payoff, it's not actually worth the twist. Maybe it's all a matter of taste and genre, but I like all genres, if they're done well. So maybe this was an anomaly akin to that which we are currently seeing in the catastrophic mainstream of TikTok darlings like Fourth Wing and dark romance titles that I dare not name. This may very well have nothing to do with indie publishing. This may be a matter of echo chambers and false positivity. I feel as though, at least in this case, there is an illusion of process that ended up not actually being there. I have absolutely no problem with self-published books having errors in them or problems. It's only when there's unanimous praise for objective flaws in a company-backed product that I start to get a bit wary. But hey, maybe I should just shut the f up and just be happy that maybe the downtrend in opinion of small publishers will make what I put out seem that little bit better in comparison. Yeah, right. Let me know any and all of your thoughts on the state of indie publishing and marketing in the comments below. Have you been scorned by the harsh difference in a book's presentation compared to its quality? I don't like the idea that people just want to rip down big influencers because they can, although they do, or that what big influencers put out can never actually live up to the expectations they set, if they set them well. But I can't help but notice that big influencers in social media spaces are consistently providing underwhelming content than what was promised. Is this a fault of the fans, endorsing something or someone that they know nothing about? Okay, I'll stop rambling because this could go on forever, really. There's a lot of little pockets of problems and topics that I've touched on here that would require their own video or case study to properly discuss. Honestly, just tell me your thoughts. I don't mean to be jaded as a writer, but as a reader with very limited funds, I am of the class described, and I am becoming more and more wary to trust publishing houses or even reviews on any book more than I trust a small handful of booktubers. And that feels pretty scary, like very dystopian, because I'm not a picky reader, and if I do spend money on a book, I want it to be from a small place that will see the profit because it is a small author or business. My trust in quality in that regard is invaluable, and it's waning. Saturation of the book market and all there is to read in the world as a whole, I don't want to get lost in a void of crap books and be unable to find something worth my time because it's all an illusion now, if that makes sense. Getting misled leads to being discouraged, which leads to not reading at all. Okay, I'm stopping now. Comment below all your thoughts on publishing. Tell me the good, the bad, the grammatically incorrect. If you like this video and want to support this channel, there's a link to my Ko-fi in the description below. Please subscribe, give me book recommendations. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.